The princess's bold refusal. The grand hall of the palace glittered under the soft light of floating orbs. Alien dignitaries from across the galaxy stood in a semicircle, each vying for the attention of Princess Vellana. Known as the Jewel of Xylora, Vellana was the daughter of the most powerful monarch in the system, her beauty and grace unmatched. Yet, her cold demeanor had earned her another title, the Untouchable. Today was no different. The air was thick with anticipation as Vellana prepared to meet yet another line of suitors. Warriors, kings, and scholars had come from distant worlds, each with gifts that sparkled like the stars. But their faces showed worry. They had heard the stories of her rejections, harsh and final. At the far end of the hall, Vellana entered, her silken gown flowing like water. Her golden eyes scanned the room with a sharpness that made even the bravest alien shift uncomfortably. She moved to her throne, the crowd bowing as one. "Begin," Vellana commanded, her voice calm but firm. The first suitor stepped forward, a hulking warrior with scales that gleamed like molten silver. He bowed deeply, presenting a blade crafted from a dying star. The room murmured in awe at the weapon's brilliance. "My princess," he rumbled, "this blade is a symbol of my strength and dedication. I offer it to you and vow to protect your kingdom with my life." Vellana tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. She reached out, running her fingers over the blade's edge. For a moment, the warrior's hopes soared. Then she spoke. "Strength is meaningless without wisdom. I have no need for reckless muscle," she said, her voice like ice. "You are dismissed." The warrior's face fell as he backed away, his pride shattered. The next suitor, a scholar with a towering intellect, approached. He carried a crystalline device that projected images of galaxies yet unexplored. "My princess," he said with a flourish, "this knowledge is yours. With me, you will discover the secrets of the universe." Vellana's eyes flicked to the device, her interest momentarily piqued. But then she sighed. Knowledge without action is an empty gift. "Leave." One by one, the suitors came and went, each more desperate than the last. Vellana rejected them all without hesitation, her tone growing sharper with each dismissal. The advisors standing behind her exchanged uneasy glances. They had begged her to choose someone for the sake of diplomacy, but Vellana was unyielding. As the final suitor departed, the silence in the hall was deafening. Vellana rose from her throne, addressing the crowd. "Is this the best the galaxy has to offer? Titles and trinkets do not impress me. I seek something more." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed through the hall. Heads turned as a human man stumbled in, tools clattering to the ground. He wore a utility jumpsuit smeared with grease, clearly a worker and not a noble. I'm sorry," the man stammered, scrambling to pick up his tools. "There was a malfunction in the energy conduits, and I was told to." "Silence," Vellana said, raising a hand. The man froze, his face pale. The crowd began to murmur, some laughing at the human's clumsiness. But Vellana's eyes narrowed, studying him closely. Unlike the suitors, he wasn't adorned in finery or surrounded by an entourage. He looked ordinary, yet there was something in his eyes. Determination, curiosity. She couldn't quite place it. "What is your name?" Vellana asked, her tone softer than before. Jason," he replied nervously. "Jason Walker, engineer." The murmurs grew louder. A mere engineer, standing before the princess. It was absurd. "And what gift do you bring, Jason Walker?" Vellana asked, stepping closer. Jason blinked, caught off guard. "Gift? I don't have one, Your Highness. I was just fixing the conduits." Vellana's lips curved into a faint smile, her first of the day. Honesty, a rare trait in this hall. "Tell me, Jason Walker, what do you think of the suitors who stood here before you?" Jason hesitated, his gaze shifting to the shimmering blade and the crystalline device left behind. "Well," he began cautiously, "they're impressive, sure, but They seemed more interested in showing off than actually knowing you, if I may say so. The room erupted in shocked gasps. Valana's advisors looked as though they might faint, but the princess held up her hand, silencing the commotion. Interesting, she said, her golden eyes locked on Jason. Very interesting. She turned to her advisors. Prepare my quarters. I wish to speak with this human further. Jason's jaw dropped. Wait, what? Me? Valana glanced over her shoulder, her smile now unmistakable. You may not have a gift, Jason Walker, but you have given me something far more valuable. Honesty. Let us see where it takes us. As the hall emptied, Jason followed the princess, his mind racing. He had come to fix a broken conduit. Instead, he found himself at the center of a mystery that would change his life, and perhaps the galaxy, forever. A royal invitation. Jason sat in the cramped engineer's quarters deep within the palace, his hands still trembling from the events in the grand hall. The princess's piercing golden eyes had seemed to see right through him, and her cryptic words echoed in his mind. Let us see where honesty takes us. The air was thick with tension as his fellow engineers crowded around him. Are you out of your mind, Jason? One of them whispered harshly. You spoke to the princess like she was just another person. Jason shrugged helplessly. What was I supposed to do? She asked me a question, and I answered. I didn't think she'd. He stopped mid-sentence as the doors to their quarters hissed open. A royal guard stepped inside, towering over everyone in the room. His gleaming armor seemed more ceremonial than functional, but the expression on his face left no doubt. He meant business. Jason Walker, the guard announced, his voice echoing with authority. You are summoned to the princess's private chamber. Now. The room fell silent. Jason's colleagues exchanged wide-eyed glances, some muttering prayers for his survival. Jason, on the other hand, could barely breathe. Do what? He stammered. There must be a mistake. I'm just an engineer. Her Highness does not make mistakes, the guard interrupted, stepping aside to make way. Follow me. Jason's protests died in his throat. With a nervous gulp, he grabbed his tool belt, out of habit more than necessity, and followed the guard through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. The ornate architecture grew more elaborate as they ascended, the simple metallic walls giving way to intricate carvings and glowing gemstones. Jason had never ventured this far into the royal quarters before, and the grandeur of it all only deepened his unease. Finally, they arrived at a set of towering doors adorned with shimmering symbols. The guard knocked once, the sound resonating like a drumbeat. Enter, came a calm but commanding voice from within. Jason stepped inside, his breath catching at the sight of the room. It was both opulent and serene, with walls that seemed to pulse softly like the heartbeat of a living being. At the center of it all sat Princess Valana, poised on a low dais surrounded by a cascade of flowing silks. She looked up from a holographic console, her expression unreadable. Jason Walker, she said, gesturing for him to approach. Come forward. Jason hesitated, his feet feeling like lead, but the guard's pointed cough behind him spurred him into action. He stopped a few feet from the dais, bowing awkwardly. Your Highness, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Valana studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp but not unkind. You look as though you expect to be executed. Jason blinked, unsure if she was joking. I didn't think you'd actually want to see me again, he admitted. The corners of her mouth lifted in a faint smile. Honesty. There it is again. A refreshing trait in a world of sycophants. Jason shifted uncomfortably. If you don't mind me asking, Your Highness, why did you summon me? I'm not exactly qualified for royal matters. Valana's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. Do you know why I reject every suitor who comes before me, Jason? He shook his head. I don't think it's my place to guess. Humility, she noted, almost to herself. Another rarity. Very well, I will tell you. Every suitor I've met has offered me something. Power, wealth, knowledge. But none of them have offered me what I truly seek." Jason frowned. "And what's that?" Villana leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Authenticity. Someone who speaks not to impress me, but because they believe in what they say. Someone who doesn't treat me like a prize to be won." Jason opened his mouth to respond, but Villana continued before he could. "Your arrival in the hall was unplanned, Jason Walker. A mistake, some might say. Yet, in that moment, you showed me something I have not seen in years: genuine honesty. That is why I summoned you." Jason was at a loss for words. "I don't know what to say to that." "You don't need to say anything," Villana replied. "I did not summon you to flatter me. I summoned you because I need your help." Jason's brow furrowed. "Help? From me? But I'm just an engineer," Villana finished for him. "Yes, I know. And that is precisely why you may succeed where others have failed." She gestured toward the holographic console, where a complex series of blueprints shimmered into view. Jason recognized them immediately: an intricate energy grid system, though far more advanced than anything he'd ever seen. "This is the heart of Xylora," Villana explained. "It powers the palace and much of the surrounding city. Recently, it has begun to falter, and my advisors are at a loss. I have reason to believe that someone is tampering with it." Jason stared at the blueprints, his mind racing. "You think it's sabotage?" Villana nodded. "Indeed, and if the heart fails, it would cause devastation on a scale you cannot imagine. That is why I need you, Jason. You have already proven yourself capable and trustworthy. Will you help me?" Jason hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't a hero or a noble. He was just an engineer, thrust into a situation far beyond his understanding. But as he looked into Villana's eyes, he saw something he hadn't expected: hope. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "I'll do it, Your Highness. I'll help." For the first time, Villana's smile reached her eyes. "Good. Then let us begin." As Jason studied the holograms, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far greater than himself. Trials of compatibility. The next morning, Jason was summoned to the royal courtyard, his head still spinning from his unexpected new role. The air was crisp, with the twin suns of Xylora casting golden light over the palace grounds. Alien birds chirped melodiously from the trees, but Jason barely noticed. His mind was preoccupied with Villana's words from the previous night. "You must prove yourself capable of more than fixing conduits, Jason. The trials will reveal if you are worthy." He hadn't dared to ask what she meant, and now he regretted it. As he stepped into the courtyard, he found Villana waiting for him, flanked by two of her advisors. She was dressed in a flowing outfit that shimmered with an otherworldly glow, her expression as composed as ever. Surrounding them were dozens of palace staff and guards, all watching intently. "Jason Walker," Villana called, her voice carrying authority. "Today, you will face the first trial." Jason glanced around nervously. "Trial? What kind of trial?" Villana raised her hand, and one of the advisors stepped forward, holding a small, cube-shaped device. It pulsed with a faint blue light, its surface etched with alien runes. "This is a synchron orb," Villana explained. "It regulates the energy flow within the palace. Recently, it has become unstable, and none of my engineers have been able to fix it. Your task is to repair the orb before it causes a catastrophic power surge." Jason's stomach sank as he stared at the device. "And if I can't?" Villana's expression didn't waver. "Then the surge will disable the palace's defenses, leaving us vulnerable to outside threats." The gathered crowd murmured, their whispers filled with doubt. Jason could feel their eyes on him, judging him as a mere human, unworthy of such a task. He swallowed hard, his palms sweating. "I'll need my tools," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Villana gestured, and a servant brought over a small case. Jason opened it to find his trusted equipment, nothing fancy, but reliable. Taking a deep breath, he knelt by the synchron orb, examining its intricate design. The orb hummed faintly, its energy fluctuating erratically. Jason recognized the patterns from his work with less advanced systems. It was like trying to fix a power grid during a thunderstorm, but the principles were the same. He began working, carefully unscrewing a panel to access the internal circuitry. Sparks flew as he adjusted a connector, causing the crowd to gasp. Jason ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. "What are you doing?" one of the advisors demanded. "That connection is unstable." Jason glanced up briefly. "It's unstable because someone routed the energy flow backward. I'm rerouting it to stabilize the current." The advisor huffed, clearly unconvinced, but Velana raised a hand to silence him. "Let him work." Jason continued, his movements precise despite the pressure. He adjusted the orb's energy regulators, his mind racing as he calculated the best way to balance the flow. Time seemed to stretch as he worked, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the orb emitted a steady hum, its blue light glowing brighter and more stable than before. Jason leaned back, exhaling in relief. "It's done," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some impressed, others skeptical. The advisor who had doubted him stepped forward, examining the orb closely. After a moment, he straightened, his expression grudgingly respectful. "He's right. The orb is functioning perfectly." Jason allowed himself a small smile, but his relief was short-lived as Velana stepped forward. "Well done, Jason Walker," she said, her tone neutral. "But this was only the first trial." Jason's smile faded. "There's more." Velana nodded. "Much more. The next trial will not test your hands, but your courage. Rest for now. You will need your strength." As Velana turned to leave, Jason called out, "Your Highness, why are you doing this? Why not just let me fix what needs fixing and leave?" Velana paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Because, Jason, this is not just about fixing broken things. It is about proving who you are, and whether or not I can trust you with what lies ahead." Her words left Jason more confused than ever, but he knew there was no turning back now. As he walked back to his quarters, the weight of the trials pressed heavily on his mind. What did she mean by courage? And why did it feel like this was about more than just palace maintenance? For the first time, Jason realized he wasn't just repairing technology. He was stepping into a role far larger than he could have imagined. And whether he liked it or not, the galaxy was watching. A test of courage. Jason barely had time to recover from the first trial before Velana summoned him again. This time, he found himself escorted to the palace's outer gates, where an alien vehicle awaited. It was sleek and intimidating, its dark metallic surface shimmering under the twin suns. Jason's stomach churned with unease. He was an engineer, not a soldier, and the idea of stepping outside the safety of the palace into the alien wilderness was far from appealing. Velana stood near the vehicle, her composure as regal as ever. She was flanked by a group of palace guards, all armed and ready. Jason noticed their tense expressions and felt his unease deepen. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice edged with nervousness. Velana turned to him, her golden eyes steady. "Your second trial, Jason Walker. This one will test your courage." Jason frowned. "Courage? I thought you needed me to fix things, not fight monsters." "This is not a fight," Velana replied calmly. "It is a retrieval mission. There is a crucial component needed to stabilize the heart of Kaelira, but it lies in the crystalline wastes, a dangerous region beyond the city. My guards will accompany you, but the decisions you make will determine your success." Jason hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. Crystalline wastes. That doesn't sound inviting. "It isn't," Velana said, her tone grave. "The terrain is treacherous, and the wildlife is unpredictable. However, the component we seek is essential. Without it, the palace's energy system will collapse." Jason's heart sank. He wanted to argue, to tell her this wasn't his job. But when he looked at her, he saw something he hadn't expected: trust. She was relying on him, a human engineer, to help save her people. He sighed. All right, let's get this over with. Velana nodded, a hint of approval in her gaze. Good. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The vehicle sped across the barren landscape, its anti-gravity engines humming softly. Jason sat in the back, sandwiched between two stoic guards. He stared out the window at the desolate beauty of the crystalline wastes. Jagged crystal formations jutted from the ground like the spines of some ancient beast, their surfaces reflecting the light in a kaleidoscope of colors. It would have been breathtaking if not for the ominous atmosphere. As they neared their destination, the driver slowed the vehicle, and one of the guards turned to Jason. We'll have to continue on foot from here. The terrain is too unstable for the vehicle. Jason climbed out reluctantly, shielding his eyes from the harsh glare of the suns. The heat was oppressive, and the air was filled with a faint, high-pitched hum that set his teeth on edge. What exactly are we looking for? He asked, trying to mask his nervousness. Velana's voice crackled through a communicator on his wrist. A shard of Cynthium crystal. It is buried within the center of the largest formation. Be cautious. The crystals are known to attract predators. Of course they do, Jason muttered under his breath. The group moved cautiously, their boots crunching against the crystalline ground. Jason kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting some alien creature to pounce at any moment. The guards seemed unfazed, their weapons at the ready, but their silence did little to comfort him. When they reached the central formation, Jason's heart sank. The crystal towered over them, its surface jagged and uneven. Climbing it would be risky at best. That's it, he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. You want me to climb that? It's the only way, one of the guards said flatly. We'll cover you from below. Jason stared at the towering crystal, his palms sweating. Heights weren't exactly his thing, and the thought of scaling this alien structure made his stomach churn. But he knew he didn't have a choice. All right, he muttered, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing. He began the ascent, his hands and feet finding precarious holds on the crystal's uneven surface. The material was surprisingly cool to the touch, despite the heat of the suns. As he climbed higher, the view became more surreal, the landscape below shimmering like a dream. But Jason couldn't afford to admire the scenery. One wrong move could send him plummeting to his death. Halfway up, a distant growl echoed through the air. Jason froze, his heart racing. He glanced down to see the guards below raising their weapons, scanning the horizon. What was that? He called down. Keep moving, one of them shouted. We'll handle it. Jason swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't let fear paralyze him now. He continued climbing, his muscles burning with effort. When he finally reached the top, he spotted the shard of Cynthium crystal embedded in the structure. It pulsed faintly, its surface emitting a soft glow. Carefully, Jason pulled out a tool from his belt and began extracting the shard. The crystal resisted at first, but after a few tense moments, it came free. Jason held it up triumphantly, relief flooding through him. I've got it, he called down. But his relief was short-lived. Below, the guards were locked in a fierce battle with a pack of alien predators. The creatures were sleek and fast, their crystalline bodies blending with the surroundings. Jason's heart pounded as he realized he had to climb down, through the chaos. Great, he muttered. This just keeps getting better. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jason began his descent, clutching the shard tightly. The climb down was even more treacherous than the ascent, but he managed to keep his focus. When he finally reached the ground, one of the guards grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the vehicle. Move, the guard shouted. Jason didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted back to the vehicle, the predators hot on their heels. Just as Jason leaped inside, the driver gunned the engines, and the vehicle shot forward, leaving the creatures behind. As the palace came into view, Jason collapsed into his seat, the shard still clutched in his hands. He was exhausted, but a small part of him felt a spark of pride. He had faced his fears and succeeded. Valana's voice crackled through the communicator. "You have done well, Jason Walker. Your courage has proven you capable. But the trials are not over." Jason groaned, his head falling back against the seat. "Of course, they're not." Despite his weariness, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time, he wondered if he might actually be up to the challenge. The truth revealed. Jason paced in his quarters, the Cynthium crystal sitting on a nearby table, glowing faintly. His legs ached from the climb, and his mind swirled with questions he didn't know how to ask. Valana's words from earlier echoed in his head. The trials are not over. He had faced physical danger and proven his skills, but something told him the next challenge wouldn't be so straightforward. Before he could dwell on it further, the doors to his quarters slid open. Valana herself stepped inside, her golden eyes calm but intense. She carried an air of authority that made Jason instinctively stand straighter. "Your Highness," he said, trying to keep the fatigue out of his voice. "Sit, Jason," she said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." Jason blinked. Valana rarely used such an informal tone. Curious and slightly wary, he sat, watching as she took the seat opposite him. For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the Cynthium crystal. "You performed admirably in the wastes," she began. "Most would have faltered in the face of such danger, yet you succeeded." Jason shrugged, trying to play down her praise. "I just did what I had to do. The guards did most of the hard work." Valana's lips quirked in a faint smile. Humility. Another rarity. But this conversation is not about your actions in the wastes. It is about why you were there. Jason frowned. "I thought it was about fixing the heart of Kaelira." "In part," Valana said, her expression growing serious. "But there is more at stake than you realize. Jason, do you know why I reject every suitor who comes before me?" He leaned back, caught off guard by the sudden shift in topic. "I figured you just have high standards. Not that I blame you, given some of the guys I've seen." Valana chuckled softly, a sound Jason realized he hadn't heard before. "In a way, you are correct. But the truth is far more complicated." She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Centuries ago, a prophecy was passed down among my people. It spoke of a great upheaval, one that would test the strength of our civilization. According to the prophecy, our salvation would come not from within, but from an outsider. Someone unlike us in every way." Jason's brow furrowed. "An outsider? You mean me?" Valana nodded. "When you entered the hall, uninvited and unremarkable to most, I sensed something. A resonance. I cannot explain it fully, but I knew you were different. The trials were a way to test my instincts, to see if you truly were the one foretold." Jason stared at her, struggling to process her words. "A prophecy? About me? That doesn't make any sense. I'm just a guy who fixes things. I'm not a hero or a chosen one." "Perhaps not in the traditional sense," Valana said. "But the prophecy never spoke of a warrior or a king. It spoke of someone with the ability to mend what is broken, to bring light where there is darkness. You may not see it, but you have already begun to fulfill that role." Jason ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He had expected Valana to be enigmatic, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. "Okay, let's say you're right. What am I supposed to do?" "Fix the heart of Kaelira and call it a day." Valana's expression darkened. "The heart is only the beginning. There are forces at work in this galaxy, forces that seek to exploit our weaknesses. They have already begun infiltrating my kingdom, sowing chaos and distrust. The sabotage of the heart was no accident." Jason leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "You're saying someone's trying to take you down from the inside." "Exactly," Valana said. "And if they succeed, it will not stop with Kaelira. The entire system could fall into chaos. Jason shook his head, struggling to wrap his mind around the gravity of the situation. So, what? You think I can stop them? I'm not a spy or a soldier. I'm just a human. Velana interrupted, her tone firm. And that is precisely why you are invaluable. You think differently. You see solutions where others see only problems. That is why I chose you. Jason let out a shaky breath, staring at the glowing Cynthium crystal. It felt like the weight of the galaxy was pressing down on him. This is a lot. I don't even know where to start. Velana reached across the table, placing a hand on his. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, and Jason felt a strange sense of reassurance. You start by trusting yourself, she said, and by trusting me. Together, we will uncover the truth and restore balance to this kingdom. Jason met her gaze, the determination in her eyes igniting something within him. He didn't fully understand the prophecy, or why Velana believed in him so strongly, but he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away from this. All right, he said, his voice steady. I'm in. What's the next step? Velana's smile returned, faint but genuine. The next step is the most dangerous of all. You must go where no outsider has ever dared, into the heart of the royal archives. It is there we will find the answers we seek. As Jason nodded, a mix of fear and excitement coursed through him. The truth had been revealed, but the real journey was only beginning. The final challenge. The royal archives of Kaelira were a place of legend. Few had ever entered, and even fewer had emerged unchanged. Located deep beneath the palace, the archives were said to contain the collective knowledge and secrets of Velana's people, guarded by ancient mechanisms that tested not just intellect but character. Jason stood at the entrance, staring at the massive obsidian doors that pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light. Alien runes danced across their surface, shifting like ripples on water. He could feel a hum in the air, as though the doors themselves were alive. This is it? Jason asked, glancing at Velana, who stood beside him. She was clad in a ceremonial cloak, her golden eyes focused on the doors. This is where we will find the answers, Velana said, but it will not be easy. The archives are protected by trials of their own. Trials that test more than just skill or courage. They test the very essence of who you are. Jason let out a shaky breath. Great. More trials. Why am I not surprised? Velana turned to him, her expression softening. These are the final trials, Jason. If we succeed, we will have the knowledge to stop the forces threatening my kingdom. If we fail. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Jason could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. What happens now? He asked, trying to mask his apprehension. Velana stepped forward, placing her hand on a glowing panel next to the doors. The runes on the surface flared brightly, and the doors began to slide open with a low, resonant hum. Beyond them lay a long, dark corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. We enter, Velana said simply. The corridor was colder than Jason expected, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. Bioluminescent veins ran along the walls, casting an eerie glow that illuminated their path. Jason's footsteps echoed loudly, each step a reminder of how alone they were. As they ventured deeper, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Floating platforms hovered above a seemingly bottomless chasm, connected by narrow bridges of light. In the center of the chamber, a massive crystalline structure pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm. This is the first trial, Velana said, her voice barely above a whisper. The archive of memory. Jason frowned. What does that mean? Velana gestured to the crystalline structure. It will draw upon your deepest memories, your greatest regrets, and your most painful experiences. It will test your ability to confront them and move forward. Jason's stomach churned. You mean it's going to mess with my mind? In a way, Velana admitted, but you must face it alone. I cannot help you here. Jason hesitated, staring at the glowing structure. He had faced physical danger before, but the thought of confronting his own mind was far more terrifying. Still, he knew there was no turning back. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the nearest platform. It glided smoothly toward the crystalline structure, stopping just short of its glowing surface. Jason reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing against it. A surge of energy coursed through him, and the world around him shifted. Jason found himself standing in a dimly lit workshop. Tools and parts were scattered across the workbenches, and the air smelled of oil and burnt circuits. He recognized the place immediately. It was his old garage back on Earth. "What the?" he began, but his voice caught in his throat as he saw a figure hunched over a workbench. It was him. Or rather, a younger version of himself, covered in grease and muttering under his breath as he worked on a broken piece of machinery. Jason felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. He knew what was coming. The younger Jason let out a frustrated yell, throwing a wrench across the room. "Why can't I get this right?" he shouted. "I'll never be good enough." Jason's chest tightened as he remembered the moment vividly. It was the night he had almost given up on his dreams, convinced that he was a failure. He had been so close to quitting, so close to walking away from everything he loved. "You're stronger than this," Jason said, stepping closer to his younger self. "You didn't quit then, and you're not going to quit now." The younger Jason didn't respond, but the scene began to fade, replaced by another memory. This one was even harder to face. A hospital room, where Jason stood over the bed of a close friend he had lost. The guilt and grief hit him like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have been there. I should have done more." But as he spoke, he felt a warmth spread through him, a realization. He couldn't change the past, but he could honor it by moving forward. He had carried this pain for so long, but now he saw it for what it was. A part of him, but not all of him. The memories dissolved, and Jason found himself back in the chamber, standing on the platform. The crystalline structure glowed brighter, as if acknowledging his success. Valana's voice broke the silence. "You did well." Jason turned to see her standing at the edge of the chamber, her expression unreadable. "That was intense," he admitted. "The next trial will be no easier," Valana said. "But you have proven your strength of spirit. Come, we must continue." Jason stepped off the platform, his legs shaky, but his resolve stronger than ever. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. Together, they would uncover the truth and take the next step toward saving Kaelira, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The human chosen. Jason emerged from the final chamber of the archives, his steps unsteady, but his heart resolute. The trials had pushed him to his limits, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yet he had prevailed. Behind him, Valana followed, her golden eyes alight with an expression he hadn't seen before. Pride. The glowing cynthium crystal in his hand pulsed faintly, its rhythm synchronized with his heartbeat. The final chamber had revealed its true nature, a conduit of unimaginable energy, capable of stabilizing the heart of Kaelira and restoring balance to the palace's failing systems. But more importantly, it held something else, a key to a long-lost secret that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Jason turned to Valana as they stepped into the open air. The twin suns bathed the palace grounds in golden light, a stark contrast to the dark corridors they had just left. "That was something else," Jason said, his voice hoarse. He wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to process the whirlwind of events. Valana nodded, her gaze fixed on the crystal. "You have done what many thought impossible. The trials were designed to test not just your capabilities, but your essence, and you have proven yourself in ways no one could have anticipated." Jason let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "I still don't get it. Why me? I'm just a guy who fixes things. I'm not some chosen hero." "Perhaps that is exactly why," Valana said, stepping closer. "You do not seek glory or power. You see problems and work to solve them. You act not out of ambition, but out of a desire to help. That is what sets you apart." Jason frowned, glancing at the crystal in his hand. "And what happens now?" "I fix the heart of Kaelira, and everything goes back to normal." Villana's expression grew serious. "Fixing the heart is only the beginning. The knowledge we gained from the archives reveals a larger threat, one that has been lurking in the shadows for years. The saboteurs are not mere rebels. They are agents of an ancient faction determined to destabilize our galaxy." Jason's stomach tightened. "And you think I can stop them?" Villana stepped even closer, her gaze locking onto his. "I know you can. You see the galaxy through a lens no one else does. Where others see insurmountable odds, you see solutions. That is why you were chosen." Jason let out a slow breath, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had come to Kaelira as an unassuming engineer, expecting nothing more than a routine job. Now, he stood at the center of a galactic struggle, his actions carrying consequences he could barely comprehend. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "What do we do first?" Villana's lips curved into a faint smile. "First, we repair the heart of Kaelira. Then, we prepare for what's to come." The heart of Kaelira was located in a massive chamber at the palace's core. It was a marvel of alien engineering, its structure composed of intricate crystalline networks that pulsed with energy. But now, the pulses were erratic, the system dangerously unstable. Jason stood before the heart, the Cynthium crystal in hand. Villana and her advisors watched from a safe distance, their expressions tense. "No pressure," Jason muttered to himself as he stepped forward. The repair process was delicate, requiring precision and focus. Jason worked methodically, inserting the crystal into the heart's core and realigning the energy conduits. Sparks flew as the system roared to life. The chamber bathed in a blinding light. For a moment, Jason feared he had failed. But then, the light steadied, the pulses becoming rhythmic once more. "It's done," he said, stepping back. Relief washed over him as the heart emitted a steady hum, its energy stabilizing the palace's systems. The room erupted into cheers, the advisors praising Villana for her leadership. But Villana's gaze remained fixed on Jason. "You have done more than repair the heart," she said, her voice carrying a quiet intensity. "You have proven that humanity's potential extends far beyond what the galaxy believes." Jason chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know about all that. I just did what needed to be done." Villana stepped closer, her tone softening. "Perhaps that is what makes you remarkable." Before Jason could respond, a sharp tone echoed through the chamber. One of the advisors stepped forward, his expression grave. "Your Highness, we've intercepted a transmission. The saboteurs are mobilizing. They know the heart has been restored, and they're planning a full-scale attack." The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension replacing the brief moment of triumph. Villana's jaw tightened as she turned to Jason. "It seems our work is far from over," she said. Jason nodded, his own resolve hardening. "What's the plan?" Villana placed a hand on his shoulder, her golden eyes filled with determination. "We fight. Together." As they left the chamber, the hum of the heart of Kaelira resonated behind them, a reminder of what they had achieved, and what still lay ahead. Jason didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't face it alone. The human chosen by fate and the alien princess bound by duty would stand side by side, ready to face whatever challenges came their way.